First of all, our Pledge of Allegiance, which we say every day, we pledge allegiance to the Republic for which we stand, right? The flag and the Republic for which we stand. When Benjamin Franklin, after our Constitution was ratified, he talked about giving us a republic if we can keep it. And I think people should analyze those two little quotes and wonder why there were references to republic in both of them. In any event.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I'm about to yield to my friend Ms. Meng from New York, but I'm inspired by the remarks of the gentleman from Wisconsin, especially about the word republic, which of course comes from res publica, the public thing. He happened upon a subject that's of a lot of interest to me because I wrote a paper about it when I was in 6th grade, the Pledge of Allegiance. It was written by a radical Baptist minister named Francis Bellamy. I'm not sure if the gentleman's aware of that, on the 400th anniversary of Columbus's arrival in the New World. And Reverend Bellamy, who was an abolitionist in Vermont, was concerned about the continuing salute of the Confederate battle flag in the southern states. And so he wanted to write a flag salute that would be unifying for the Union. And he wrote, "I pledge allegiance to my flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, with liberty and justice for all." And you notice what is not in there. He did not have "under God." That was added in 1954 by Congress, several weeks after the Supreme Court's decision in Brown versus Board of Education. But in any event, I'm not quite sure what the relevance is of the gentleman's invocation of the Republic or of Ben Franklin and the famous vignette about him saying, if you can keep it. Ben Franklin was, of course, a big supporter of immigration to the country, although he did display an anti-German bias in some of his writings. But I'll tell you a little story about Ben Franklin that might be of relevance to what the gentleman's talking about. Apparently, because I just did a tour in Philadelphia with the Ben Franklin people up there, and we learned this wonderful story. He made a loan to a friend of his for $100, and then he recorded in his diary that this gentleman he made a loan to for $100, Josiah, was always disappearing behind a tree or a building whenever Ben came along. And he finally caught up with him and he said, "Josiah, you know, I loaned you $100 and I'm wondering, am I going to be able to get my principal back, or at least the interest?" And Josiah said, "Well, Ben, look, the $100 is well invested somewhere else, so you don't have to worry about that." And Franklin said, "Well, what about the interest?" He said, "Well, I forgot to tell you that it's against my religion to pay interest, so I can't pay you the interest." So Franklin said, "You mean to tell me it's against your principal to pay me the interest, and it's against your interest to pay me the principal?" And Josiah said, "Well, that's right." So Franklin said, "Well, I can see I'm not going to get either." Well, look, here our principles and our interests converge very much. The principles are set forth in the Constitution, which is we count everybody, and everybody is part of the census, and everybody is part of the reapportionment process. It's been like that since 1790. We don't need to start finger painting on the Constitution with this silly election year proposal. But it's also in our interests because, as my colleagues have said, this is a land that is built on immigration, except for the Native Americans who are already here and the people who were brought over as slaves. All of us are the descendants of immigrants to this country. Tom Paine said when he got to America in 1774, 2 years before the Revolution, he said, "This land, if it lives up to its principles, will become an asylum to humanity." Not an insane asylum, mind you. An asylum to humanity, a place of refuge for people seeking freedom from religious, political, and economic oppression. That's who we are.
Now, let me just say, if Jamie Raskin is even in the same area code as you, and you think you're going to get away with perverting the Constitution for some cheap partisan win, trust me, you will not. You will be admonished in such an articulate way that you won't even know that you're being publicly humiliated. So for the next Glenn Grothman out there who wants to distort the Constitution, please, I beg of you, make sure Jamie Raskin isn't nearby. What's happening here is that this Republican lawmaker, Glenn Grothman, is speaking out in favor of adding a question on citizenship to the census. What that would do is serve as a fear tactic to any immigrants, legal or undocumented alike, by highlighting a question that may put them or their families at risk. And so the result is that they avoid the question altogether, which results in an undercount of those very people, which affects congressional apportionment. In other words, surprise, surprise, Republicans are looking to fearmonger about immigrants to help themselves politically. Who could have possibly seen this coming? And for those who say undocumented immigrants shouldn't be counted in the census, The census is used to meet the needs of people living in certain districts. That means schools, hospitals, food supply, transportation needs, jobs. Depending on citizenship status, certain folks, of course, can't vote in our elections, but they still participate in our society. We can't let xenophobia supersede the reality about who lives where and what resources are needed in certain locations, despite Republicans' attempts to do exactly that. And by the way, for anybody who says undocumented immigrants shouldn't get any resources or services because they're not even Americans, they are a net positive to our economy. First of all, they're not legally permitted to receive Social Security benefits. However, according to a 2013 report, undocumented immigrants contributed $13 billion in payroll taxes voluntarily. In other words, they perform jobs that Americans don't want, they voluntarily pay taxes that they derive no benefit from, and they don't take away any Social Security benefits from Americans. If we didn't have undocumented immigrants, we would be worse off economically. In other words, Republicans are fine with the economic benefits that they bring, but still want to deprive them of any acknowledgement of their existence or humanity, because pro-life or something. And finally, the last argument I'll make is that it doesn't matter what the Glenn Grothmans of the world think, because the Constitution is clear. It says nothing about counting only legal citizens, but rather that all people, citizens and non-citizens, with the usual residence in the United States are included in the census. That is the end of the issue. As Raskin says, Republicans can't simply fingerprint all over the Constitution because they want to. This issue has already been adjudicated by the Constitution. Although, I must say, it sure is interesting that the only party that isn't capable of abiding by the Constitution is the same party that literally calls itself constitutionalists. How about that? And just as a quick aside, in case you weren't aware, I host a YouTube series with the congressman called Class with Jamie Raskin, where we debunk constitutional fallacies made by Republicans. We've discussed the Second Amendment, presidential immunity, which is the case before the Supreme Court right now, barring insurrectionists from holding federal office, and coming up in this series is literally a class on this question. America isn't a political democracy, but a constitutional republic. So if you want to watch that episode as soon as it's out, please make sure to subscribe to this channel. In the meantime, hopefully this little moment serves as a warning to the next misguided Republican out there who tries to pervert the US Constitution for his own party's political benefit. Or, at a bare minimum, they should at least make sure that Jamie Raskin isn't anywhere nearby the next time they decide to do so. I've got a really exciting announcement. I've written a book. It's called Shameless. This book explores how Republicans have exploited their historical branding while attacking our democracy, how the media has proven itself a willful participant, and how Democrats can learn from this to rebalance the political scales and save our democracy. It has been a lifelong dream of mine to write my own book, and so I'd like to ask you to pre-order it by clicking the link right here on the screen. And if you buy within this pre-order period, your book is going to come with a signed nameplate. As you know, I've never had a single sponsor on my channel. I don't ask for money or anything like that, but if you're looking for a way to support me, this is hands down the best way to do it. So again, follow the link right here on the screen, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for pre-ordering Shameless. And as always, make sure to subscribe to see more of my content.